welcome everyone to our Voices and Perspectives panel. My name is Acacia Warren and I coordinate the single subject program, our teacher credential program in the School of Education. So I work with middle school and high school teacher candidates. And on behalf of our dean, Richard Aram, I would like to thank all of our panelists and audience members for attending this webinar. Richard is our fearless leader right now during unprecedented times. You know, we have a pandemic, distance learning, civic unrest, fires, and anything else that impacts education. So we appreciate him for his support and guidance. And I'll turn it over to Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Tomabergi, and I am Acacia's partner. I work with the multiple subject candidates, so the elementary teachers. And we'd also like to thank Professor Elizabeth Pena. She's the Associate Dean of Faculty Development and Diversity, and she's been very supportive of all these kinds of events that we try to do. So thank you.
So before introducing our panelists, we want to provide a little context regarding the purpose of today's webinar. We are basically providing a platform for working professionals to share their insights and thoughts regarding various topics, particularly those topics that have impacted Black people and Black communities. Our panelists represent diverse perspectives, diverse professions, and diverse backgrounds. And we look forward to listening and learning from their lived experiences.
Right. And as people who work with teachers, we appreciate all of our panelists for being here today because you have so much that you can share with our current teachers, with our pre-service teachers. Being a school in Orange County, we don't have a lot of Black students, and especially in the schools, but we still believe that it's something that our teachers need to know in order to be more inclusive teachers. So thank you for being here.
Mm-hmm. So first you'll notice that one of our panelists is missing. John Gutierrez is our Sergeant of Police in law enforcement. He had a death in the family, and so he's not able to join us. However, he did say if there are questions regarding law enforcement, put them in the chat, and Susan and I will keep a record of that, and he will answer your questions, you know, regarding law enforcement, and he has firsthand knowledge for everything that's happening in law enforcement right now. Okay. All right. So, oh, Susan, did you want to mention the chat?
Thank you. For those of you who are in the audience, we encourage you to use the chat to explain any connections you're making to any of our speakers or provide any kind of affirmations. If you hear something one of our speakers says that's especially important to you, go ahead and provide that affirmation. At the end, we will take questions if there's time, but for during the panel, we'd like to keep it positive. And so let us know if you have anything that the speaker said that really resonated with you, connections you can make, affirmations. So thank you.
All right, so at this time, we are going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. So our panelists are going to say their name, where they attended college, and or the college that they choose to share, and a little bit about what they do professionally. So your name, where you attended college, and a little bit about what you do professionally. So we will start with Elliot.
Okay. My name is Elliot Osborne. I'm glad to be part of this particular webinar. First of all, I'll start off, I was born and raised in Oakland, and given my age, those individuals that study history, you know, and whatever that involves during the civil rights movement in Oakland, I was there. you know, and it's a fascinating piece. Okay, I am currently the Protestant chaplain of the Alameda County Jail, which is called Santa Rita, for those that are know anything about the Bay Area. And the schools that I went to, I deal with the colleges. I'm going to mention Laney College because when I went there in 1967, a long time ago, it was a trade school. They didn't even call it a community college at that particular time. But that's where I began in terms of college. I didn't finish there. I didn't even complete all the transfer stuff there. But the reason I mentioned that is because it was there was a teacher that I had there that convinced me. First of all, he was interesting. Number two, convinced me that this thing called a college education was possible. Okay, from there, and then I went to Chabot Community College, which is in Hayward. And from there, I went to what at that time was Cal State University Hayward. It's now Cal State University East Bay. And I did a Bachelor of Science in Social Psychology, and then I did the master's degree in Educational Psychology. Also, that was on my public education side. I also went to a private university called Andrews University, and that's where I completed the Master's of Divinity and my doctorate, and that's in Michigan. Then I also went to, for my secondary credential, Loma Linda University, which is in Loma Linda, California. And that pretty much were the educational institutions that I went through. And I just have to mention this because I did, when I was in Africa, I taught at the University of Eastern Africa, but I also took a class there, and that's where I took my Hebrew studies. That's me.
Okay, thank you. And our second person?
D'Amico Johnson here. I am currently in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. I got my undergrad from Milwaukee School of Engineering. Got my master's degree in technology and a master's of science in information communication technologies from the University of Wisconsin-Stout. Currently, I work in the IT industry. I work for a manufacturing company. My pretty much what I do at work is I bridge the conduit between IT and the business. I work with the business leadership to make sure that we implement technology to help drive business goals. I also want to point out that anything that I say today is my opinion. I am not in any way a representative of my organization, nor am I, nor am I available to speak on their behalf. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Acacia and Susan, for putting this on, and thank you to the panelists. My name is Aaron Vine. Sorry?
Turn your,
Aaron
okay.
Vines. I grew up in Fairfield, California, live in Los Angeles currently. I attended Kings River College, which is now Reedley College, community college, a very proud community college graduate. Transferred to Cal State Bakersfield on a basketball scholarship. And all this time I was learning how to be a student. Then got a master's degree at Laverne in education counseling, at Bakersfield, got a master's in education counseling and a second master's from Laverne and a doctorate from USC. My current job is Assistant Superintendent, Vice President of Student Services at Antelope Valley College, where I serve as a Vice President of Student Services. And that's me. Thank you.
Aaron, we didn't hear your last college.
Yeah.
You just want to hear it again. It's the University of Southern California. I'm a proud Trojan. Mind you, I started from a community college, couldn't get into any colleges, and then went to the best college in the city of Los Angeles,
Hmm.
in the nation at that point.
Okay, thank you. All right, next. Oh, gotta unmute. CJ, you gotta unmute. Yeah.
I'm the first one to do it. Clarence Patterson, but everybody calls me CJ. I started out going to college. I went to Diablo Valley College, which is in Pleasant Hill, California, in the Bay Area. And then, with all due respect, I did transfer to the best college in the city of Los Angeles and probably the nation, UCLA. And then I went to the University of Arizona, which is in Tucson. And I went there for law school, got my Juris Doctorate. Rewind in undergrad, I got a degree in sociology. I'm currently living in St. Paul, Minnesota, which some people will know that as the Twin Cities. I am an attorney. I have my own firm, and I practice family law and some criminal defense.
Okay, my name is Doug Berry, and I attended Long Beach State College, and also went and got my master's degree at New England College in New Hampshire. Currently, I'm retired, and I'm planning on staying retired, but I am involved with the 100 Black Men of Orange County, where we mentor young African-American young men, but also get involved in the community to support the efforts of the African-American community, both in health and wellness and in economic empowerment.
I think that's me.
Yes.
My name is Dave Devereaux. I am currently, well, I'm a graduate of Clark Atlanta University. When I was there, it was Clark College, but it's now Clark Atlanta University, a proud Panther, HBCU, and got my master's at National University. I'm currently the national senior editor for RealUrbanNews.com, which is a news platform that references Black community issues within the Black community. My focus has been government issues in education, since I am a retired principal of the Los Angeles Unified School District. That's where I know Acacia, Dr. Warren from. And it has been 2 years since I retired from LAUSD, and it's been the best 2 years of my life.
Good evening, everyone. My name is George Lawrence Blankenship, commonly known as Larry. First, I want to thank the host of our discussion, Dr. Susan Toma Berge, and my friend, Dr. Acacia Warren. Thanks for having me and creating this environment for us to have this very necessary discussion. I'm a practicing physician in the Los Angeles area. My specialty is physical medicine and rehabilitation, and my specific practice focuses on spine and joint pain conditions. I attended arguably the best university in the nation, Howard University. Go Madam VP Kamala Harris. I did my undergraduate studies there. I did medical school at Howard University, and I did my medical residency at the University of California, Irvine.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Harry. You can call me David or Harry, it doesn't matter, either one's fine. I went to college at USC, class of 2000. From there, I got my master's in curriculum development from Pepperdine Graduate School of Education and Psychology with a focus on urban education. I'm going into year 11 as a teacher, 10 years in the classroom. And for this year, I'm stepping into admin as a director of instruction.
Okay. Well, thank you all of our panelists. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first question of the evening. And the first question is, what particular aspect of the Black Lives Matter movement resonates with you the most? Start
Okay.
with,
Yes. The part that resonates with me most has to do with the saying itself, Black Lives Matter, because the exact opposite in my adult childhood and adult experience is what I know. And so when you say Black Lives Matter, comma, no, it doesn't. Individuals in our country got terribly turned on as a nation with Floyd, and then of course Breonna, and et cetera. But those things to me were just a repetition. They go on and on and on. Before there were video cameras, like I said, born and raised in Oakland, you know, the police used to snatch us out of our cars, call us a bunch of dirty names, and just walk away. You know, but there were no video cameras. And so that's the part that resonates with me, is that Black Lives Matter, this late in the game, still has to be nurtured, talked about, engaged, because we have been so marginalized for 381 years.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Guess I'm up. To kind of build on what Elliot's saying as well. Not only, you know, the name of Black Lives Matter, I think the movement, it shined a light on police brutality in general. I mean, in the Black communities, it's something we've known that's always existed. But I think the BLM movement moved it from the back pages of the newspaper to the front pages of the newspaper. And I think by doing that, it's given us an opportunity now to have these conversations, uncomfortable conversations, but conversations on how we can change things.
Resonates with me most, I would say, is I started in education as a counselor, then moved into an assistant principal, and we worked a lot on equity. And talking about Black people specifically always brought discomfort to the room. And there wasn't many people, except for Black people, talking about the equity gaps and things that take place in the Black community. And for me, it really allowed conversation. It is uncomfortable, but there's a whole lot more conversation. And I think that's what's one of the things I appreciate about Black Lives Matter, is that it's allowed more conversation on our campus where I am currently. We had a banner, which was a battle to put a banner up and say Black Lives Matter, probably because, you know, we're in a community that's pretty conservative. I live in LA, but I work in LA Valley, so it's very different. But the fact that there's so much conversation about Black lives and the allies and folks taking a serious look in their classrooms and engaging in equity work and anti-racism work, it's become more of a thing where it's acceptable more so. And depending on the campus, it may not be as acceptable, but it's definitely Black Lives Matter was a huge movement that led to a lot of conversation that I think is moving education in a more positive direction in society at large.
Yeah, I think the most, I guess, what resonates with me the most, and how just big the movement is, whether it's between Black people, the allies, and I think one of the reasons that it is it's a movement that's, I'm not going to say singular focused, but it's not a huge platform. There's not necessarily a huge face that goes along with it. We get the idea that, you know, it's very simple. Do the lives of Black people matter to people? And it's a question that should be yes, but there is clearly a debate with a lot of people and in the criminal justice system. But the fact of the matter that we're having such a basic conversation that's been needed to have, you know, for a couple hundred years at this point, I think that's what resonates the most with me, is that it's allowing us to have this at kind of the most basic and necessary conversation that we need to have to get past racism.
Yeah, the part that resonates most with me, that stands out in my mind the most, is the magnitude of the movement. You know, having like Elliot growing up in the 50s and 60s, there would be demonstrations, there'd be marches, but usually they were like centralized to one city maybe. Wasn't very diverse. The diversity of the groups now that have taken part in it, and the fact that it spread to other countries encourages me that those who would wish to ignore the issues, it's a lot harder for them to ignore because of the magnitude and the, like you said, being on the front page. So that's what stands out for me.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of what Douglas said, it's really just the awareness piece where all the inequities, the things that Black folks have been fighting for so long, hundreds of years, is put on the forefront. It's now something that the world is looking at. You know, you have the protests in America, protests in Japan. I mean, everywhere. You know, it was moving to see these things. In fact, it was really moving. It almost brought me to tears at one point when I saw the protests in Japan. But I think that resonated with me. You know, it's for so long, it's like a cry, I guess, a silent cry. And now here we are, you know, our voices are heard a lot louder. So that's the best, you know, that's the main thing I think that resonates with me.
Part of the movement states that like we affirm our humanity. And while part of me, it's like, it's ridiculous that we have to say that, but I like that it is a sort of a public declaration to society, and also an affirmation for ourselves to lift ourselves up and encourage ourselves. And even though we live in a society that like means us harm and it's quite violent towards us, I just think that declaration that we matter, that we are important, that we are here, is just a necessary thing to say.
Okay, thank you all for sharing. Next question is, with all the heightened awareness around anti-racism and racial justice, have you seen any meaningful changes within your profession? And if you want to address representation of Black people in your profession, you can feel free to add that. But have you seen any meaningful changes?
Okay. Well, when I deal with this in terms of my current profession as a chaplain at the Alameda County jail facility, it almost gives me a heart attack. In our local police departments in Alameda County, there have been some visible changes that I would call positive, especially when it comes to hiring. But the Alameda County Sheriff's Department is a lot like the Alameda County Sheriff's Department of 50 years ago. Extremely few African Americans in the system. They have a recruiting class at the academy right now. There's 75 people. And there's one Black male, one Black female, and then another person whose skin color is dark. Out of 75. And then in the parking lot, we have the staff parking lot. That means that the deputies and the staff members park there only. And there are no Kamala Harris or Biden signs. There are MAGA signs and Trump signs all over the cars. And so when we talk about the changes that are needed in terms of the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, and then I have a firsthand connection with these deputies, they haven't caught up with that idea that Black Lives Matter. They don't talk positively about the inmates. Most of the inmates are Black and brown, okay? And when I say most, there's 2,100 folks there. 2,000 of those, just about 2,000 of those are Black or brown, okay? So you got about 150 that are other. So we're not, it's us. And the deputies, I don't even go in the cafeteria. I can't eat in there because their negative racial jokes, their hostile attitude is still prevalent. So on my work setting, we have a long way to go. And I would say that those individuals that think that officers, and now I'm only talking about Alameda County sheriffs now, need training. The people that I'm working with every day, they don't need training, they need a new job. Because how do you train somebody to treat a human being like they're human? How do you train an individual to have respect for the value and quality of life? I just don't think that these individuals, 25, 35, 45 years old, that something called training is going to adjust that mindset. In my orientation there, been there a while now, but it was a 9-hour orientation, several different officers dealing with a perspective, and every officer through that 9 hours generalized that the inmates are untrustworthy, they will lie, they will use you, they will misuse you, you have to be careful, et cetera, et cetera. Not one officer, including the captain, said that we are here to try to help turn these individuals to another way of life. None of that. Zero. It was all be cautious. You can't trust these people. You know, look out for your life. Look out for others. And then the idea that I needed to be in like mind with them. You see, they saw me coming on as a representative of the sheriff's department. And I had to let them know, even in the orientation, you might have to fire me soon, because I will never identify as a as an Alameda County sheriff with the attitudes that are presented here, because I am here because I do respect human beings, and some human beings go afoul of the law. I'm not here pretending that 2,200 people are all innocent, but 2,200 people still are human beings, and that they are worthy of our personal respect and attention. And when it comes to resources, or whether it's addiction resources, housing resources, finances, jobs, and et cetera, that we should be able to connect these individuals to try to get them on a track so they won't return. Right now, currently, 62% of the individuals that are in that institution, when they leave, they will be back. So whatever we're supposed to be doing, if you're in a school and 62% of your students fail, I don't think you could be saying that it's all the students' fault. I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go with our next person.
Okay, so I'm in the tech industry, and I thought this was a great question, actually. Prior to this question, I've been in conferences. I've been in a lot of leadership conferences. In fact, I've been in the tech industry close to 20 years now. And I always noticed that there was definitely a lack of representation amongst minorities, Blacks in general and women. And so after I read the question, I decided to do just a little bit of research. And I started searching around the internet, and I found that there was a few surveys out there. And one I thought was very interesting was there's a tech-based survey of 33 tech-based organizations. And of those 33 organizations, out of those 33 organizations, 8% of their employees were either Latin, Hispanic, or Black. I started to do a little bit more digging. I noticed that I ran across another interesting fact. Facebook, being an organization that leverages technology, in 2014 they reported 2% of their employees were Black. 2020, 3.9% of their employees are Black. So there certainly is, I would say, a misrepresentation of minorities, especially Blacks in technology. Um, and leadership is even worse. I haven't seen any changes. You see articles talk about, you know, there being, now that, you know, with the BLM movement and people starting to notice the injustices and the discrimination in hiring and so forth, that, you know, companies have pledged to do better as far as hiring more minorities in the technical roles and putting them in leadership. But as of yet, I have yet to see that. So it'll be very interesting to see where the industry goes in the next couple of years.
My experience, when I first arrived at Antelope Valley College, I was the only person of color on the executive staff. Our board is an all-white board, and not devaluing anybody's ability or what they contribute to the college, because they do a good job. But the truth of the matter is we're like 87% students of color, but the representation wasn't there. And our students see that, so much so that they have, with all this movement with Black Lives Matter, social justice, anti-racism movement, they've come to our board meetings and they're calling on the carpet. Why is this happening? There was a reorg suggested. In the reorg, again, all good people, but it was all white. Our students went to board meeting after board meeting. Our faculty went to board meeting after board meeting. The conversations on campus and the email threads, they feel empowered. And I think it's because of the Black Lives Matter movement. They feel empowered to talk about it. And I think it's made a huge difference. We just hired a vice president of instruction who happens to be a Latina woman who starts in January. Maybe it would have happened anyway, I don't know, but everybody's watching. In the community, the power positions are all white as well. So I'm very happy and pleased with the way that our community is moving in the Antelope Valley. And there's an expectation that there's representation. And we have some very qualified, quality people on our campus that need opportunities, that I think because of all that we're experiencing, they will now have the opportunity. It's very easy to explain why individuals should be hired and not someone else. But in my opinion, you absolutely have to give at least a chance for an interview. You have to absolutely give a chance and realize if two folks are on the table or more and someone's bringing a perspective that doesn't exist on the board or doesn't exist in executive staff, there's value in diversity and diversity of thought. And so I'm very pleased with the movement that's going on our campus, and I'm extremely excited by our students because they are adamant about what they want. So much so they were picketing out in front of the college, saying representation matters. They see it, they realize it, and they also see the value in having folks that look like them in a diverse executive staff. So I'm very pleased with the movement that we're making on our campus.
The short answer I can say to answer would be absolutely not. There's been some lip service after George Floyd was murdered. Like the bar sent, messages which sounded really nice, and they had some continuing education, like lunchtime talks about, bias and stuff like that. But as far as actual meaningful change in the day-to-day things, I haven't seen anything. I do a lot of family law, and part of that is going to mediation. And I've had numerous clients request to find an African-American mediator. There really isn't any. I've been in situations, a lot of my clients are Somalian Americans, and the cultural aspect of raising kids is a little bit more communal. If there's an issue, people don't go to the police like right away. They usually go to elder statesmen in the community. Mediators just don't seem to care at all and criticize that when that's, you know, something that they do in their community. I've never had a case where the opposing attorney is African American at all. Out of all the cases that I've had, I've been before one judge that is Black. There was, I think, about 8 judge seats on this last election that were up. And one person that ran was Black and she lost. And all the other people that were that won their elections were white men. So, you know, we all have some sort of bias, and the bias just continues to be the same people that have been in power. I'm not going to court anymore physically because of COVID, but when I was going, I can only tell you the amount of times that I was told to sit where the defendants sit. I have been identified as the defendant in court. I've had witnesses tell me that I was the person that committed the crime. And I have to, when I go to jail visits, I know I have to leave early because I have to explain and prove that I'm an attorney as opposed to just telling them, which is the standard norm. I have to call, and I always have to have my bar card on me. When I go to court, I have to usually go early because there are some bailiffs that will not let me cut in the line like other attorneys do. So I have to wait in the public lines. And so, you know, all these things, I'm not dying or anything, but I'd rather have that 20 minutes back to work. But, you know, in short, I haven't seen anything other than a couple nice emails.
As far as changes in my profession, as I said earlier, I'm retired. I was in the fire service for 35 years. And if you don't know, the fire service has a history of throughout the whole country of discrimination and racial issues. But because I'm retired, I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is my organization, 100 Black Men of Orange County. During the height of the protests, we received a lot of communications from non-African Americans asking what they can do to help, how they can educate themselves. And what we passed on to them is just that, they need to educate themselves, but also get involved. And by that, I mean, from a voting standpoint, you vote for the sheriff, you vote for the mayor, you vote for the DA, to get involved and make your voice known through that means. But we had a lot of contact during the height of the protests.
From a medical standpoint, unfortunately, I can't say that there's been any significant systemic changes that have taken place at this point. I'll bring up the awareness piece again. Obviously, we're in the midst of the coronavirus situation, unfortunately. And unfortunately, we've lost, about 276,000 people, a ridiculous amount of folks. But of that population, Blacks are 2.8 times more likely to die than their white counterparts. So I think in this point, it's really kind of raised an awareness of the health disparities, the Black health disparities, which is a good thing. I was watching Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on CNN yesterday, and the mention about the vaccinations came up, and it was promising to hear Biden speak specifically about getting the vaccinations to the communities of color. So that was promising. Again, I think it was Clarence mentioned lip service at this point. We hope that they hold true to what they're saying and deliver these things. But I think the awareness piece again comes up, which is promising, but unfortunately no significant changes at this point.
Larry, you got cut off a little bit when you were mentioning the numbers for the COVID numbers and how what the percentage was of.
Yeah, basically I was just highlighting that the COVID situation.
So, can you repeat that?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. No, I was just highlighting, it's just raising awareness about what we've known to be the case, Black health disparities. But now you have this slowdown in society, the economy is shut down for the most part, and eyes on, and you're seeing really significantly the Black health disparities. But I think that's raising awareness without a doubt about what needs to be done for Black patients in general.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to echo some of the things that Aaron brought up earlier. Some of the representation issues are still, it happens in K-12 also. So I think representation definitely does matter, and that a teacher of color can make the difference in the education of a student of color. I was fortunate to grow up with most of my teachers being Black, but that's not the case in America. The majority of teachers in America are white. Like only 20% of teachers are teachers of color, and only 2% of them are Black men. So I think when they are present in the room, they can make a difference in a child's life. As far as like changes, the changes are like slow. There's recent initiatives to like train and recruit and retain teachers of color so that they can be in the classroom. And there's even talk now of like changing curriculum so that, you know, there are more diverse authors in English classrooms, and history classrooms can cover more pre-slavery history. So it's beginning conversations, I think, sparked by the things happening in our country right now. But they're a long time coming, but it's a very slow pace that these changes are happening.
All right, thank you for those answers.
I don't think we heard, is he, what'd you say, Susan?
Oh,
we didn't hear Dave. Did Dave?
Basically from a writer standpoint, can you hear me? It sounds strange.
We can hear you.
From a writer standpoint, I'm looking at it from two different lenses. One, from an ex-principal, having been a teacher and a whole lot of other stuff before that. But I don't, from my research and writing as of late, especially since the movement took place, I'm not seeing a lot of change. I'm hearing a lot of lip service from people. I'm researching and hearing companies saying they're going to do better, or, you know, we need to do better. You hear that a lot. We need to do better. We're going to do better. That's not doing better. Doing better is proving it, you know, getting on it. If you're going to say it, then they need to get on it. Big companies, small companies, school districts, universities, all of them. I just watched a great piece about Black kids at Cambridge. And, you know, most of us don't think about England having the same issues we do, but they do systemically. And I have learned in trying to put my articles together, sometimes very frustrated at that, what you come up with is that there's a lot of work to be done as far as change as far as change needing to take place. The movement was great. I was surprised at the broad range of people participating and getting out there and making themselves known and not being afraid. That was the one thing, is the fearlessness of these young people to speak their mind. But it's one thing to talk about making change and another thing to do it. For instance, CJ to have to stand in a line as an attorney to get into the court, that's ridiculous. You know, in 2020 for anybody, let alone a Black man. That is just unacceptable. And I am continuing, as I write, the more, I think I've learned more in the last 9 months of writing than I ever have in my life, because I'm seeing so many different perspectives when you start researching an article, because I never want to put anything out there and it's like Dave Devereaux said, and all of a sudden I'm getting stonewalled by people because they're like, this guy's crazy. But, you know, I try to, whatever I put out there, I try to make sure I back it up with fact. And to hear stuff like this, gentlemen, I will admit I'm taking notes on stuff you're saying, which may end up in my article. I will quote you on them as best I can. But I think it's important to know that it's one thing to make a promise about making change or seeing change or being recognizing a need for change based on racial behaviors in America. Another is just to do it. You know, I would appreciate somebody who just did it and said, well, no, we implemented this right away. We did this right away because we know that's what needs to happen. And from the other areas, from medicine to law, I was astounded to get see some of the statistics that I have surrounding Black people and medicine and the law. And it continues, I can't say it's getting better, at least not from my research, but time will tell. We just pulled the Band-Aid off the wound. We'll see how quickly, how deeply it heals.
All right, thank you for your responses, and I'm sorry for cutting you off there, Dave. So, Acacia and I work with teachers, pre-service teachers. These are people who are going out into the field. Do you recall having a teacher from kindergarten through high school who taught you about social justice and civic engagement? Can you explain a little bit?
Well, I can deal with this one because given my age and what I'm about, I never had a Black teacher from K to 12, even though I was in Oakland, and there was never any mention. Now we're talking in the middle of the civil rights movement, and I never had a history teacher, a civics teacher, an English teacher to even assign an author that was Black. In none of the schools that I went to, from kindergarten through even mentioned through 12th grade, even mentioned Black History Month. And so what I came to know of my own people and my own heritage, fortunately, I had two Southern-born parents, one from Mississippi and one from Texas. So they were the ones who were talking to me about what was going on. But from an academic end, there was never any mention. And I mean, things like Kennedy, he was white. So the only mention, there was never a mention of Medgar Evers or Malcolm X or, the 4 girls that were killed in Birmingham. It was never mentioned on our campus. A principal never had a moment of silence or, never, zero. And so what the reason I'm mentioning it and saying it the way I'm saying it is that we have a social order that was fostered on ignoring the plight of Black people. Not just anti, but you don't exist. And I can remember this, and I'll end with this. When I was in the 11th grade, required U.S. history, that in our U.S. history book, which is about 412 pages, as I remember, and the reason I remember this history book, because on one page, 2 paragraphs, half the page, it mentioned in slavery. And that was it. It never mentioned a person by name, Frederick Douglass or Harriet Tubman, no name. And so in the 11th grade, I learned from my history class that was required that Black people were slaves. So my K through 12 education about myself, my culture, and my people had nothing to do with my formal education. Next.
Okay. So I went to diverse elementary, middle, and high school. I did have some exposure to Black History Month, some civil rights, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, just kind of your basic Black history. But I seriously, I cannot recall a teacher that surely stood out teaching, social justice and civic engagement. And Elliot made a statement on, our history, our society ignoring the plight of minorities, Black people, and that brings me to the Black Wall Street and the massacre in Tulsa. And I have a question for the panelists. At what age did you guys hear about Tulsa and the Black Wall Street? It's something I can honestly say I was in my 30s. I'm 42 now, and this was something that was never taught in school. In fact, there was no mention made of it until just recently. And my question for you guys is, at what age or when did you find out about that?
Just recently, Devereaux, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just, you know what, even though I went to Black college, I'm a graduate of HBCU, just recently people started talking about it. I remember knowing about it when I was probably about in the 11th grade, because I have parents who both my mother and father are attended Black college. So it was not something that was going to be skated over in my family, in recognition of what had occurred. And I grew up in Texas, so it was easy to reference something that happened in Oklahoma. But I do remember, and we kept thinking, why didn't they tell us about this in junior high school? Why didn't we, that was always the question. But for it to come to light so in the past couple of years, I would say, so vividly, it's almost like somebody just discovered it, but this has been around a long time. And you're right, that's a good question, because you probably get varied answers from a lot of people, but mine was around the 11th grade. I remember hearing about it.
Yeah, for me, again, born and raised in Oakland, I went through 7th Street, where my father, it was a Black business district, Black barbershops, Black stores, bar and grills, theaters in Oakland. When the city of Oakland shut down that very financially stable Black businesses, and my father's bar and grill, called The Main Event, was one of those places that was shut down. And then they put a post office on 7th Street, and then ultimately the BART tracks went right down the middle of it. So I lived through an economic removal of Black people in my own lifetime. And so as a young person, again, I didn't learn that formally, but so my father would talk about Tulsa. He talked about Boley, Oklahoma. He talked about Rosewood. He talked Allen's, down there by Bakersfield and et cetera. So I got it early from my parents.
So I first heard about Black Wall Street, I was well into my adult life. As far as having a teacher that focused on social justice or anti-racism, no. I had the typical paragraph or page of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, but that's about it. And the unfortunate thing is, Black people and African people have such a great, rich history. There's so much that would empower Black people, but the system wasn't designed to do that. And so I think, I know a lot of our educators, and I'm sure none of them on this call, were ill-equipped. They went through our school system as well, so they didn't have the background. They didn't learn their universities, and they didn't think it was as important probably to go learn it on their own. But, and this is kind of a different direction, but I did have a teacher that showed me she loved me, and that went a long way. And it was my 11th grade of high school. I got a poor grade on a test, and I wasn't much of a student. I went to like 6 elementary schools, and so my education coming up wasn't that strong, and so it was no big deal for me not to do well on an exam. But she cried and said, "I can't believe this," and had not just me but some other students over to her house on Saturday to study, and I ended up with an A in that class. And so individually, she wasn't equipped, I don't think, to have that sort of social justice movement. We're in a different time now also. But she did show me love. And I'm really saying this for the educators on here. Sometimes if you don't have the capacity to talk about some of these very important subjects, or Black history, African history, sometimes love will go a long way.
I think the kind of strangely how I guess I heard about Black Wall Street was the rapper The Game had a like record label called Black Wall Street. I think I must have been in my early 20s, maybe 10 years ago or so, and I typed it into Wikipedia trying to look it up, and then I saw this whole completely different story than what I was expecting. But I've never heard about it in any history class or any class or anything like that. As far as K through 12 teacher, I can really only think of I guess one or two. In my sophomore year of high school, we read the Autobiography of Malcolm X, which was, one of the first books I can remember reading of something like that, and probably the only one in K through 12 for school. And then I did have an 11th grade history teacher who would, I remember she was from the Bay Area. She was like kind of a hippie, and she would teach us the stuff in the book, and then she would teach us like real facts and stuff that were not in the book, and we would always be tested on it. It was like she wanted us to know that the book wasn't representing the entire truth. So, and remember, we had an expanded like Black History Month. We had to do like a project, or pick like a historical American from a certain time period, and we were like highly encouraged to pick somebody who didn't, was like a different race or a different gender. But she was more than willing to teach outside of the book. And I think about like Trump talking about, how he wants to go back and teach, real American history. I'm just worried about, because growing up, we had American history that was really watered down, which didn't talk about anything that our founding fathers or how we got here, anything that they did wrong. So if it's going to be like more pro-American, I just wonder, what are we just going to skip over everything? And I think it's important to tell the whole truth and let the kids decide, like, was this person a good person, bad person, or were they like a human somewhere in the middle? But just glossing over the facts of how like some of our founding fathers and stuff treated Black people isn't really an injustice, in my opinion. And then as far as civic engagement, that was the only teacher as well who told us that the importance of voting, how you actually went out and voted, how you get registered and stuff like that to vote. But even like my government classes, and this was senior year of high school, and I was 18, never discussed actually how to vote or register to vote or anything like that.
As far as Black Wall Street, I didn't hear about it until maybe 10, 12 years ago, and I'm getting close to 70 years old, so I was not told anything about it. As far as my K through 12 education, I grew up in the harbor area of Los Angeles, and at that time there were very few Blacks. Most of the schools were predominantly white. I was taught nothing, almost nothing, I won't say nothing, almost nothing about slavery, nothing about successes of Blacks. I think I had maybe 2 Black teachers during those years. And so I was very ignorant of our history. And it seemed like too, now thinking back on it, it's almost like we didn't exist from the way they were teaching. We didn't exist until we were brought here as slaves. They didn't talk about Africa and the kings and queens we were descendants of. And so that's the thing that stood out in my mind. But no, I was taught very little, if anything, about our civil responsibilities and the injustices that took place.
I did have a teacher. I know I commented on D'Amico's question earlier, but I did have a teacher who, coming back to what was said earlier about sometimes love goes a lot further. Mr. Watson was my 4th grade teacher, and I'm left-handed. So growing up in Texas, if you were left-handed, people thought something was wrong with you. I mean, they literally thought something was wrong with you, which I can't wrap my head around these days. But Mr. Watson did not want people to see me in a negative light. So what he would do is when recess came, he would make me stay. He ordered me a left-handed desk and would make me stay inside and practice my writing so that you could not tell my handwriting was that of a left-handed person, because he said people would judge me. And until I became an adult, I did not realize the significance. I grew up pretty much hating the man, not because of that, but because he was over to my house on Saturdays because he and my dad were good friends. So it just kind of rattled me later on to find out that, that was how people thought. And he was doing that because he did not want people to label me. And so it wasn't about him teaching me so much about Black history or something that I had missing, because he knew I was getting that at home. He was coming from a different angle, which was one of love. And to this day, I will never forget that. And he is still alive. So I get a chance to always thank him when I see him.
So great question, D'Amico. The Tulsa thing, sadly, man, I think it was 3-4 years ago for me that I heard about Tulsa. And sad as I went to Howard University and HBCU. So just kind of highlights the underexposure of the real truth of America's history. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri myself, went to school in a neighboring town called Raytown. So growing up, it was predominantly white. I'd say about 70% non-Black, 30% Black. So I didn't have any exposure or any particular teachers that pulled me aside and, taught me the whole mention of social justice or injustice, for that matter, and civic engagement. The only person I take that back. The only person was a vice principal, for better or worse, who I interacted with, who just spoke of those things. And that was probably the most that I'd ever heard of it. And that was high school. The first time that I really heard from a professor about that was in my residency at UC Irvine. And we were taking tests and whatnot. And I remember he pulled me aside and he mentioned to me, listen, you got to, for lack of better words, you got to do better. You got to, excel beyond the average, because average just won't do for being Black in America. In the way he phrased it. This was Ronald Takimoto, who was a professor from Japan. So still, it wasn't even from one of my a Black person, a Black man or woman. So yeah, the great question. It just highlights just the underexposure that we have, lack of vision that we have when we pursue higher learning and whatnot. But yeah, that unfortunately, K through 12, no exposure. Yeah.
I can echo what the rest of the group is saying. Many of the rest of the group, I didn't know about it until a recent TV show featured it in a TV show. So I had no idea about it, so no exposure. As far as a teacher, for me, it was Mrs. Watts, my high school English teacher. She taught like civic engagement as a component of Black excellence. So while we were in English class, she talked to us a lot about who we are and what it meant to be Black and how to engage in society as a Black person. So we spent a lot of time talking about that. And I also remember she led student council. So student council, the whole voting process and how to campaign and how to write speeches and how to get votes and things like that. That was a big part of at our school. Like we made a big deal out of the election process. So she also taught us about volunteering. She arranged for us to like go to shelters and serve food. And we did a lot of like drives to gather resources like food and clothing for shelters. So I grew up that as a component of my English classes in high school.
Thank you for sharing your experiences.
Okay, our next question, we want to talk about community service. So what are your thoughts about community service and why do you think it matters for the Black community? And what types of community service have you provided, either in the past or currently?
Well, community service, I was a church-raised kid. And so community service was something that was, I thought was normal. I mean, I didn't learn it in school, but getting involved with people and distributing clothes and food and all of those kinds of things. My mother was the head deaconess for like 25 years in our little church and that kind of thing. You know, so being civic minded, not dealing with racial issues now, but just being civic minded and extending yourself and helping was something that I learned from literally from mama's knee kind of thing. But when it came to education, the individual that got me involved to think in terms of like voter registration and importance and all of those kinds of things. It wasn't one of my classroom teachers, but it was I guess in those days, what did they call him? It was kind of a boys' dean, I guess they called him, even though it was a public high school. But so he worked with us and Mr. Big, we called him. And he always talked about how important it is that whatever you do, leave a door open for somebody to follow you. He always talked about how important it was. You know, you get your education and all those kinds of things. That's good, but that you need to think about something that is important in the community and something that you'll do even if you don't get paid for it. And he said, and then that becomes your community service. You know, I thought that was kind of odd when I was 16 years old, you know, but it stayed with me. And then my personal full engagement in civic activities got fully engaged in 1967, 68 with the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, of which was at that time, we were considered criminals. It was not a Black Lives Matter movement as far as J. Edgar Hoover was concerned. And our social order wanted the officials, the policing agencies, they wanted to stamp us out. So that civic engagement took with it the fact that you may lose your life for your people. And that became a very significant teaching for me. And putting everything on the line for something that is important, for your people, for your culture, is something that I also tried to teach my own children when just by living, and they're getting involved and doing, and always give back. And for those of you who don't know, I am very proud of one of those children called Acacia Warren.
My thoughts on community service and what it means to the Black community. So my mom, my aunts are from the South, and as a kid, I always heard how it takes a village to raise a child. And when I think of community service, that's what I think of. To me, my commitment or my involvement in the community is my piece of providing that village to help raise a child, to give them a positive role model, to make a positive impact. And as far as my volunteering duties, currently I'm in a role right now in my organization where I travel quite a bit. So I haven't been able to do as much as I like. For Christmas, we adopt families from less fortunate areas and provide gifts to kids. That's something we've done in the past, and that we've decided to do again this year. In the past, I've worked with kids through coaching. I've worked with Big Brothers Big Sister organizations. I was a member of the Girl Scouts of America. I did some reading with girls. I've worked with high school kids, tutoring and so forth. So for me, it's giving back and presenting myself as a positive role model. I think that's the key. Giving kids, letting kids see, not just talk about it, but see your actions. And I think actions definitely speak louder than words. And if they can see a positive role model, especially a Black role model, I think it gives hope. So I think that, community service is key. I think anything that anyone can do, if it's not monetary, from just giving your time and talking to kids is key. And I think it certainly helps the Black community.
My first experience doing community service was in the church. A lot of food drives, clothes drives, building funds and all that. And then when I got into education, I did some of the same kind of things at the middle school I worked at as a counselor. And I think it's important also that many of our students see positive Black role models engaging in this sort of thing, because unfortunately, the media hasn't been so kind. And so when there's opportunities for to give in positive contributions to the community, it's great. Currently, you might see it on my shirt. I'm past president of African American Male Education Network and Development, AMEND, and that's my current community service. At least that's where I spend a lot of my time now. And that's an organization where there's about 16 African American males. Just about everyone has their doctorate. Most pretty young, in their 40s probably now, some 30s. And when the students see us, they're amazed at all these doctors. They can't believe it. We do mentoring. We do scholarships up to, like, our highest year was probably close to $100,000, and they're for community college students. And we follow them all the way through until they graduate from the university for a bachelor's. But they always come up to us and say, "Wow, I've never seen this many Black male people with doctorates." And I haven't seen it either before I joined the organization. We've taken a couple trips to Africa, and the students don't pay for anything. And we do show them the history. We go and see the emperors and their castles, and we went to Lalibela in Ethiopia, and many of these places where all these memories are coming back. One of our students said, how come they haven't told us this? How come we didn't know how brilliant we are? How come we didn't know? And we took went to a number of places in Ethiopia, Senegal, Gorée Island, and just showing, again, that rich history that's lacking. And every single time they come back with so much, they feel so empowered because they see where they come from. But that's the majority of my community service. We have pretty large conferences where we have people like Michael Eric Dyson, Mark Lamont Hill, Kendi, and a number of other people speak at it, up to 1,000 people with educators, faculty, staff, administrators, students. And we, part of the conference, we work with folks to help faculty understand how to teach Black males and Black students in general. And yes, that's the majority of my community service. I think it's important that, and our students tell us that it's important that they see us and they see us in that role.
I think community service in the Black community is really important because historically it's filled the gap in which our government has kind of left us to survive on our own. Really think what D'Amico said, you know, it takes a village to raise somebody. And I just remember over the years, you know, had a great family, but throughout the years, Black people pulling me aside, helping me out, people who were like nearly strangers. So for me, it's important to do as I feel like I owe. It's paying my debt to society that I have been the beneficiary of a lot of people who have helped me out along the way. Things I'm kind of trying to do right now is I go in and volunteer and read at elementary schools. It's like a program they have through the state bar here, just so they can, I feel like the kids need to see a Black attorney. I put on classes about protester rights. So to try to show them how they can protest peacefully, and if they are arrested, what they can do. I used to run a legal referral network to try to connect people who were in dire situations financially with attorneys that could help them for cheap or free in some instances. But yeah, for me, it's about paying it forward for all the help that I've gotten over the years.
I think we all agree that community service is important, so I'm going to keep my comments short. I believe that community service is a way we can positively impact our community. I think it's something we all should do. I think it brings about empathy for others. It brings about a better understanding of others. And just it's an excellent example of, you know, showing what Black men particularly can do. One of the things we do with our young men that we mentor, we have them get involved in food giveaway programs. And we also have them volunteer at the Black History Parade of Orange County that goes on every year in February.
When I took over, when I was assigned the principalship at Barack Obama Global Prep, I met with my team, including Acacia and 2 other assistant principals, and we decided that every 8th grader had to complete so many hours of community service. Of course, the moment we delivered that message, they were like, well, what does that mean? So we kind of walked them through it by making sure that every kid understood what community service was. And then we gave them guidelines of places they could go. We encouraged them to go to their churches, libraries, help out at the Boys and Girls Clubs, you know, anything like that. And it worked really well because the one thing they were questioning upon trying to determine whether or not they had satisfied the requirements to culminate, because they don't graduate in middle school, was, do I have enough community service hours? And most of the kids, I would say 95% of the kids in that class had all completed it. And that was, to me, was a huge success. I continued on after I retired. I was asked to sit on the board of directors for an upstart called Turning Point Mentoring. And it's to address males between the ages of 14 and 21. And they asked me to do it because they know I have an educational background. So I just completed last week the social curriculum for Turning Point mentoring program. And, you know, a lot of times when you're dealing with people who don't understand education, they think a curriculum is like, what English will you talk about? This is a social curriculum. So we're talking about things like honesty, respect, you know, any gamut of just being a good person. And I put it together and presented it to the other board members. There are 5 other board members. And of course, they were shocked. They had no idea. They were expecting me to come in there with English, math, science. And I said, no, this is a mentoring program. I'm not trying to back them up in class. You'll lose them. They won't come if you're going to talk to them about English. Let's let the schools do that. So we're still trying to kick it off. We're still trying to get things together, but we have all the necessary paperwork. I always say this wrong. He received his 503C, I think that's what it is, to be a nonprofit. So we're headed in the right direction, but I'm most proud that I was able to write a curriculum that I think will hold kids' interest and will show them something. And there's one woman on our board and the others are all males. We just want these guys to see positive male role models. And, we're still working on our target group of kids. So, but I think community service is important both for self and to teach it to youth so that they will pass it down and, continue that, because kids listen. I always used to tell kids listen to kids. You're the most powerful person you are as a young person to other young people, if that makes sense.
So I think the other panelists did a great job of summing up the importance of community service in the Black community. Like Clarence said, for a lot of young Black students or Black children, if you will, for that matter, that fills that void where the government falls short, where formal education falls short. They get this vision. Myself, I didn't see through K through 12, didn't really see a Black male image, if you will. So community service definitely fills that gap and allows young Black children to just get that vision and see these types of things. The organization Dr. Bonds mentioned, I had a chance to meet the gentlemen that run the organization and some of the young brothers who are part of it. And it was powerful, like you said, because you just don't get that, unfortunately, you don't get that collection of Black intellect and progress, if you will, and positivity highlighted. But when you get in a room with that, it's powerful. And that's what community service obviously does for you. Myself, community service is more in the form of mentorship, if you will, just having younger Black aspiring physicians and students come and shadow me for a day and see what I do and just teach them how it goes, teach them how to be a Black professional and how you got to move through this, through the gamut, through the situation, So community service, you can't stress how important it is in the Black community. Yeah.
I'll keep my response short. I agree with everybody. It's definitely important for the community. Currently, my community service is around my position as a teacher. So I mentor students, I offer tutoring, I encourage and engage students in like drives for gathering resources for other people in the community. And then I also mentor former students through college. And my wife and I are helping, pay the tuition fees of to former students as they go through college. So I keep it around that area.
Oh, cheers to you for doing that. Thank you for sharing. I want to talk about fatherhood. It's not lost on us knowing that at least 65% of kids or in the Black community grow up in there are still father figures, even if fathers are absent from the homes, and fathers themselves. And so we want to just have you briefly share about what fatherhood means to you and who's a father figure that you would like to pay tribute to.
Well, I consider myself highly blessed because as a child, I had my grandfather and my father. Grandfather married to my grandmother and my father married to my mama. And they raised me. And I had a very, very strong male leadership, mentorship parenting right there in front of me. And so then when I became an adult and got married, fatherhood, no, having a father and a grandfather meant a great deal to me. And I learned to respect the family name from them. I give you a little brief piece. When I was about 12 years old, I was acting up a mess. And I just knew my daddy I was going to get a beating for this craziness that I was into. And he came into my room and he sat me down on my bed and he said, son, you're going to have to change your behavior or change your name, because I'm not going to have my name disrespected in the streets by you. I was devastated. I would much rather have gotten a beating than to hear my daddy tell me that he was going to take his name back. I was hurt. I mean, and so as time went on, when I had my own children, then my children taught me fatherhood. You know, I had 5 of them. They were very close, but every night I tried to get home, no matter what I was doing, how busy I was or whatever, because they wanted to hear a story. You know, they wanted daddy to tell them a story, you know, so I had my story time with my children. As they got older, you know, I was part of their life. I went to their school plays. I went to their sports activities. I read their papers. I looked over, you know, all, and I enjoyed it so much that as they grew up, my understanding of parenting and fatherhood based on my grandfather and father in my life, that I would be there for them. And that's the way I lived it. And we've had a friend of my daughter's, it was kind of strange. She just kind of got pushed out of her house. Her mama had a lot of kids. And when her mother had twins that made 8 of them, she informed her that she really didn't have room for her. And my daughter asked, could she move in? You know, we only had 5 kids, one more, you know, and so she did. She moved in, and she still calls my wife and I mama and daddy to this day. So fatherhood to me meant that children are important, and you don't just tell them they're important, but you're involved with them, you read with them, you write with them, you walk with them, you're in their life. They know that you have their back, that even if they do something wrong, that it doesn't mean that daddy doesn't love you anymore. It doesn't mean that you can't tell the parents what's going on in your life. And that was just important to me. And so fatherhood, being that I had a father and a grandfather in my life, I knew how important it was. And then one more thing is that we hear a lot about, you know, Black boys need their father, they need that image. Yes, they do. But guess what? Black girls need to have their fathers too. We're just as important to our daughters as we are to our sons. And that you can be a father, you can be a male image, even if you don't have kids yourself, and get involved with children, because it's a vital, important glue to not only our own personal families, but to the ethic, to the culture, to who we are. When children can, yeah. When I was young, it was very important for us to have coaches, you know, in our little leagues and et cetera. And they didn't have women coaches for us. They were, and the Black men that took their time after work to coach our football teams, our basketball teams, our baseball teams, our little leagues. Oh man, it was so important for us. And so I leave that as my input in terms of fatherhood. It was great for me. I learned a lot from my own children, but it allowed me the privilege of service with love in my heart. My girls know what love is that's not connected to sex. See, they didn't have to go and give themselves away to find love because they knew a man's love from home. So when they met their husbands to be, they met men that respected them. And I'm thankful for that. I'm finished.
Fatherhood. So when I think of fatherhood, I think of, teaching with love, teaching by example. I am a father. I have 3 girls and a stepson. And for me, fatherhood is it's everything. It's being able to teach my kids compassion, empathy, and love. Teaching them that it's, to learn from their mistakes, but also that it's okay to make those mistakes. So when I think of fatherhood, that's what I think of. So I grew up. I have a lot of uncles, a lot of cousins, a lot of positive male role models. I have my dad who's in my life. I have a stepfather. And so when I think of, all of those strong male personalities, there's one thing that stands out to me, and it was my stepdad. And the reason I say that is because, for him, he showed selflessness by taking me in and treating me as his own kid. And I think that speaks volumes to someone's personality and character. And by him doing so, I'm now in that position. I'm a stepfather, and I don't call my stepson, I call him my son, because, I care for him just like he's my own. And I learned that from my dad. I've always called him dad, whether he be my stepfather or not. He's never called me a stepson. So for me, when I look back on all the positivity that I've had from Black men in my life, that particular piece does stick out. Because I think it does take a strong person to accept someone else's child and to treat them like their own.
First, I want to pay tribute to my father, Russell G. Vines, and he passed away at 47. I had just completed the 9th grade, and I always felt like I kind of missed out on knowing him as a man. I did miss out on it. And so I really understood the value of a father. When I finished college, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, but 5 of them of the same family lived with me at different times as a single man, because I had the most stable place for them. And 2 of them all the way through high school. And they joke and would call me dad, jokingly, and they still do to this day. Their dad is in their lives, but it was just circumstance that it happened that way. So I started to see how that role is so important. And then now married with a stepdaughter who, same as DeMarco, I treat her like my daughter. I don't even like to think of her as a stepdaughter because I don't feel that way. I feel she's my daughter. Fatherhood is important, and it's important for her to see her mother treated right. It's important for her to see a man that is productive, a man that is positive. And I'm reminded of that every time I see her. I want her to see that. I take it serious, and the role that I'm in, I get a lot from it. I remember those long drives home from work, especially when she was young, like 5 years old. I'd come home from work and she would hide, and I'd go find her. It was hide and go seek. So I'd have to go find her. I was so tired but I had the most energy when I'd go find her. And I kind of missed when she stopped doing it, but she's 13 now, so she don't do that anymore. But it was so much fun. So I get a lot out of it as well. It's mutually beneficial, and it's something that I wish that men didn't take themselves out of, because unfortunately so many men do, and they're really missing out on a beautiful relationship.
I was blessed. My parents are still together, so I was able to see my dad every day. When I was growing up, my dad worked a lot. He worked 2 jobs, so he might not get home till 2, 3 in the morning. So I would see him for maybe 15 minutes in the morning, and he would give me a ride to school. But he was always a phone call away. And until this day, that's still the same. I'm 34 years old now. And my dad is the person that I still call when I need some advice for somebody who will be 100% truthful, because he's the person who will let me know if I am the problem in the situation. And so, and I think that's the important relationship that we still have. I live 1,500 miles away from my dad now, but anytime I need some real advice, he's still the person that I'm going to call to make sure that I'm like putting myself in a good place. And then just having him there as a kid, seeing somebody who worked hard was, I thought that was normal, getting up, working late, every single day, but always making sure that he was always there, a phone call away. I could always call him at his office or cell phone. And so while he wasn't like physically there all the time, he was always there for the important things. So yeah.
Like the other brothers, I too was blessed to have my father in my life. And I have to say that I really took him for granted growing up until I met my friends and other people that grew up without their fathers and how they told me their lives was like. And as I've grown up and became a man, I started to realize how much of his attributes rubbed off on me. He taught me my work ethic that I have today. He taught me about my commitment to faith, about respect for women, and just how to navigate life in America with all the discrimination and all the things that go on. And so I'm always appreciative of him. And I tell you, I feel a little bit guilty about taking him for granted for all those years. And so what we try to do with the 100 is to be a man in our mentees' lives. Some of them, their fathers aren't there. Some of the fathers are there, but we just try to be another example to them so we can help bring about the things that maybe some of the other young men have when their fathers weren't there.
My dad was, to me, like the hero, because just recently I wrote an article dedicated to him around Father's Day. Unfortunately, I lost him in May of 2018, and I actually retired early because I was going to go to Texas to take care of him in the event that he got out of the hospital and needed someone to be there with him. I put my paperwork in, and unfortunately he passed before I actually physically retired, but I still retired and carried on as I needed to. But one of the most important moments that I remember is, a lot of times your mom shows up at school. I was one of maybe 30 Black kids at a middle school, at a junior high school in Texas. And I ran for student body president. Everybody kept saying, "You're not gonna win. There's never been a Black student body president here." And I gave my speech. And just as I got ready to get to the podium, I looked to my right, and my dad comes walking in with my infant brother. And the strength that it gave me that day and the charisma that I delivered my speech, I won. I became the first Black kid to ever be the student body president at this junior high school. And I would never forget that because everybody kept saying, "That's your dad? That's your dad?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's my dad." So he was always that person who was just representative. And in my article that I wrote, part of it was in reference to all that's going on with the movement, as I call it, the protest. But he had to talk with me and both my brothers at different times during our lives. And I talk about that. I talk about how significant that was. But at the time, you don't realize that's significant, you know. But those little lessons that men need to pass along to other men, other young men, so that they know that, look, this is real. This life is real, and these are the things you might want to look out for. He was always one step ahead, and you know, I really appreciated him for that. And I think my mother knew, they were high school sweethearts, so she knew what she was getting when she said yes to that man. She knew that our life was going to be as such. And Acacia can tell you, I used to talk about my dad all the time. I lost my mother in 2002, but my dad was still around, and he turned into both mom and dad after my mother left. So I just think that's what real fatherhood is. It's not always so much being there, but to me, personally, not so much being there, even though he was, but just knowing that he is there is I think critical. And I have tried to be a mentor to other young men that I see coming up who don't have a dad or who have expressed they don't have a positive male role model. I try to, you know, assert myself into their lives as best I can without overstepping, and letting them know that there are positive role models out there. And, you know, this would be a great example. If I was still working, I would have made all my students log in today just to see this.
So, father, fortunately, I had my father in my life growing up and still do. So, Douglas kind of, what he said resonated with me regarding fatherhood, and that growing up, I didn't necessarily take my father for granted, but as you kind of move through life, you can appreciate the importance of what I did get from my father, and just that, again, that vision of a successful Black man that a lot of young brothers and sisters just don't get. So fatherhood definitely was very important, or played a integral part of my life. I'm a father myself, got a 10-month-old baby girl and one on the way. So what Elliot said also resonated with me, just about showing your daughters, or your children for that matter, real love, so they don't have to go out and look for it in all these other manifestations in the world. You know what I mean? So fatherhood, can't stress enough the importance of it, without a doubt.
I think fatherhood is so important. It's difficult but rewarding as a responsibility. My wife and I have 4 daughters. We have 2 middle schoolers and 2 in elementary. And my father and I'll be transparent, did not have the best relationship growing up. He was present, but we didn't really have a relationship. And in some ways, I learned what I was going to do when I became a father. Like, I'm proud to say that my daughters, all of them, have never had a day where they have not heard that they are loved, where they have been hugged, where they have been, I've been present every night, and actually get involved in their lives. I asked them, they don't really like it all the time, but I asked them questions about what's going on and what are they interested in. So I spend a lot of time with them so that they don't have the experience that I had. And sometimes it can be exhausting, especially like me working in middle school. But sometimes when I get home, I'm just like, let me find the nearest seat so I can sit down and hope I don't fall asleep. But I kind of save energy for them so that I can spend time with them. I play video games a lot, so they have become gamers so they can spend time with me. So we play a lot of video games together. But at the same time, while I didn't have a relationship with my father, he is the person that I want to do the tribute for, because like I learned how to work hard, and he emphasized education. He's from a small island, Grenada, and I think education was like, that was it. That was like religion in the household. Like, you're gonna go to church and you're gonna be educated, both of them. So I'm educated because of it. He spent 25 years doing contracting work at USC. And because of that, I got to go to college for free. He helped me pay for grad school. So like he just has been all about education. And even though I'm in my 40s, we have become closer and we're developing in our relationship. He's an amazing grandfather, but we are working on like getting better as father and son. So that's where I'm at right now with it.
That was beautiful. Such heartwarming responses from all of you. So thank you for sharing that. I'm a teacher, Acacia's a teacher. The audience is filled with teachers, both new teachers, brand new teachers, and people who are current practicing teachers. What advice can you give to K through 12 teachers right now? K through 12 teachers and educators, especially regarding Black students. What are some things that you can share?
Well, one of the hats that I have worn. I'm muted. I'm gone.
We can hear you.
I thought I saw the little. Okay. One of the hats that I have worn in life is also a career educator. I put in about 24 years on that run. And so to those educators that are going through the system, who are going to be in a classroom, or you may be in a classroom and you're doing your graduate work or whatever, be who you are. You don't have, if you are a white male of Irish descent, that's fine. Don't try to be a brother from the hood. Be who you are. Be comfortable with yourself, but accept the fact that these students that you have, whether they're Black, Asian, Latino, or whatever, that they have lives that are valuable, and it might be worthwhile for you to learn something about the background and the cultures of the people that are in your class. So as you grow, as you go from 24 to 29 to 39, that you're not having 1 year experience repeated, but that you're able to grow because of your investment into your students. Remember, you are a teacher, they're going to learn a great deal from you, but every student that you have can be a learning opportunity for you. So that's where I'm at. I'm not into this thing where you have to be Black to teach a Black student. What I am into is that you need to be into people. As a teacher told me long time ago, when someone asked her, what does she teach? And they were talking about, do you teach English, or do you teach history, or do you teach science? She says, I teach students. I teach people. And that is something that I hope all of you as educators will always remember, that's what you have. You have students, you have people. They may be young, but that's who they are. And that you, as a person, as a teacher, as a mentor, as a guide, as a tutor, in their lives, you are very important to their lives. And even if you run into a student that's a hard head, that student may not recognize your value in his or her life right now, but if they live through life, they will remember and they'll look back. And you may not get your thank yous for that 13-year-old right now, but when he's 33, he's gonna thank you. It's just the nature of the business that you're in. You're not gonna be a multi-millionaire teaching, but in life experience and connections with your students over the years, as they grow, as they will be putting their input into their own families and their own children, it's a great profession. I hope that you'll hang in there. It's going to be tough in the beginning. There are a lot of teachers that quit before their second and third year. Don't do that, because you're going to find that your teaching profession is a reward in itself. So those are my little words of wisdom that I'd like to share.
First, I would like to thank any K through 12 teacher, any educator out there. My kids are doing virtual school right now, and I've been helping them out with school. And whew, I tell you, I applaud you all. It has been, it's certainly been a learning experience. What I would like to say is, teach with compassion, teach with understanding. You guys would be surprised how many Black students and students in general look at teachers as role models in some form of fashion. As Elliot said, teaching it's a thankless job. However, the things that you do, they may not resonate to students at the moment, but they certainly will later on in life. I think at some point in my schooling, I probably was one of those hard-headed kids. And there were teachers that impacted me in some form, that that taught me that education was important. Dad and my mom. I would also say something that Aaron said that really stuck with me. He said that he had a teacher that said that she loved him. I think that kind words and encouragement makes all the difference. There are a lot of kids out there that coming as a teacher, they may not get those kind words or encouragement at home or anywhere else. But if you get it from you guys as teachers, giving that positivity or showing that positivity makes a difference.
And it was Mrs. Moore who showed me love over and over again, and eventually got to the point where she's like a second mother to me. And she's a white woman, but she had the ability to get through to so many students, and she did that, I think, because she did love us. But what I would say that's important is, show them love, make them feel love. My experience coming up through elementary school and into high school, from being suspended from school like under 10 times in 1 year, and doing silly things and having poor grades and not showing any teacher that I had the academic ability. I didn't show them for a long time. I didn't know it. But I would say, because of my own experience, it informs me of how to be an educator myself, and having belief. To go from, I had to turn down scholarships for basketball because of my academics, and I just wasn't engaged as a student. And when I met Mrs. Moore, it really tuned me in and engaged me into academics. To go from there to being pretty successful. It informs me as an educator to believe in our students. And so I think it's deeply important that no matter, I grew up in a town that was pretty small. So if you were a criminal, everybody knew you. There were criminals in my family. So when I came up, and I was the youngest of 6, they knew what they were getting. Because of the 6, 2 of us graduated from the comprehensive high school. The rest, continuation school. And if you did an armed robbery, everybody knows it, because it was one of those towns. And that's what my brother did. And I remember my teacher in class one day asking me about it. It was very uncomfortable. I showed them nothing of what I could be, but there were educators that pulled it out in me. And I would say to the educators here, be that educator. Be that educator, even if you don't see it today. You're planting the seed. And as Elliot said, it doesn't matter your race. There is plenty of research in Black males or Black instructors or students that have Black instructors in the outcomes. But it doesn't mean that white teachers, faculty, Asian, Latinx, or whatever, can't do that same work and do a very good job. So I would say, believe in them. Give an opportunity to incorporate their culture, history into the curriculum. That's essential. It's essential. And there's not a subject where you can't do it. And if you're not doing it, forgive me, but shame on you.
I think one of the important things that if I was going to give some advice is trying to connect with your students in some level. You know, I think I was one of the kids that just had no interest in being in school, didn't like being there, didn't want to be there. But I had numerous teachers throughout and so I was just bitter, didn't want to be there. I had numerous teachers that found some way to connect with me. Didn't matter their race. I was lucky enough to have teachers of all races at a pretty diverse school, but I was able to connect with a lot of them. And whether I did good in their class or not, I was able to learn a lot of lessons. And you probably are, unfortunately, in a situation where you might not get your thank yous from your students ever, because they might not learn the lesson while they're in your class. They might learn it, a decade down the line. But so it's probably important to just never give up on them just because they're doing poorly in your class. Try to teach them as if they are still doing successful in your class, because that's probably going to go a long way, because there might not be somebody at home who is giving them encouragement, telling them that they could do it, providing any positive influence. So that would be my advice.
I'll keep it short. My advice would be to listen. I mean, to really listen to them, realizing that a lot of them or some of them come from very challenging issues outside the classroom. They may be in a single parent home. They may be in a home where there's domestic violence. They may have challenges of social injustice, dealing with the law enforcement. And so really listen to them, and it'll help you understand what is needed for them to learn. And the last thing is, many of the brothers have already talked about, is encouragement. We find with the young men, some of the young men we mentor, that they have low self-esteem. They need that encouragement. They need to be told that someone loves them or cares about them. So that would be my advice.
I will piggyback on what Douglas just said. The time before, when I spoke to Acacia's classes, the one thing I would always leave you with is listen. I was most effective as a teacher because I listened. I didn't judge, I listened. I didn't interrupt, I just listened. You can't always fix their problems. Sometimes they just want to say it out loud. And then you have to, at some point, if they say too much, you have to handle that appropriately. But in most cases, they won't. They just want somebody to listen, because mom at home may be too busy just to listen to one, because there may be 5 or 6 others. There may be other relatives living in the house, any number of circumstances. But listening, being a great listener, will make you a very successful teacher, because you will hear the pulse of your class. You will know exactly what's going on with young people, and they will begin to trust you. And with trust comes great respect. And best of wishes in the profession.
I think the advice I give is a lot of what's been said: patience, understanding, encouragement, and just generally speaking, knowing that you may be the best role model that they have in their life. And it's not to put too much on a teacher. Unfortunately, that's what society has kind of bottlenecked teaching down to, but that's a reality. You may be that best vision for success for them. So just something to be mindful of.
I would well, first, thank you all for just your willingness to even go into teaching. I would say up front, as a teacher, be sure you know who you are, because you are going to be challenged, especially those of you who go into middle school. Make sure you know who you are, make sure you know why you are doing it. And please enter the profession for the right reasons, because you genuinely love students and you want to be a teacher and an educator. Please don't build your career on the backs of Black and brown students. It's okay to be a teacher for your entire career. You don't have to move out of the classroom. You don't have to, do other things, but please make sure that you're there because you want to see students be successful regardless of their race. Just make sure that it's all about students, and that as long as you keep it student first, as long as you are patient, and as long as you remember every day why you got into this from the very beginning, I think you'll have a very long and successful career.
Oh, thank you all. Perfect timing. I'm for even later for some of our panelists who live in the East Coast. And so we're just going to go ahead and end the session. If you would like to say something to our panelists, go ahead and say it in the chat. But thank you all. We appreciate you and we appreciate our audience. And Susan, I don't know if you will have any last words that you want to share.
I feel so fortunate to be able to hear the collective wealth of knowledge in this Zoom and just the rich experiences you've all had. I think our audience is better off because of everything you've had to share. So thank you. Thank you very much.